Major ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court strengthening President Trump's authority in a decision involving birthright citizenship. The 6-3 decision along ideological lines, ruling that federal judges cannot put nationwide blocks on a president's executive orders. Justice Amy Coney Barrett writing for the majority that federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. Justice Sonia Sotomayor writing for the justices in dissent that the president's bid to end birthright citizenship makes a solemn mockery of our Constitution. President Trump calling it a big win, making a rare appearance in the White House briefing room today, saying he'll now move forward with his plans to limit birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court ruling may also allow the president to charge ahead on other parts of his agenda. ABC's senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer leads us off at the Supreme Court.
Tonight, the Supreme Court's conservative majority dramatically limiting the ability of federal judges to check presidential power. The 6-3 decision allows President Trump to move forward with plans to end birthright citizenship, which has been law of the land for more than 100 years.
Hey friends, Jack here. Let's talk real stuff. In a packed courtroom, a Trump lawyer stood up, looked the judge in the eye, and confessed to breaking the law on the spot. No warning, no preparation. And from there, the situation only got far worse. Let me rewind and paint this scene for you because words alone don't do justice to how absolutely insane this courtroom moment really was. We're talking about a hearing that started out like any other. Lawyers shuffling papers, the judge asking routine questions, Trump sitting at the defense table with his legal team surrounding him like a protective wall. Everything seemed normal, controlled, almost boring if you weren't paying close attention. Then the prosecution asked a question about documents.
This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law.
Federal judges in 3 states had ruled Trump's order on birthright citizenship blatantly violates the Constitution and Supreme Court precedent, issuing nationwide injunctions blocking the order from taking effect. But today, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, writing for the majority, said those sweeping injunctions went too far and that federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies.
I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people.
In a biting dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said the liberal justices would not join so grave an attack on our system of law, saying Trump's bid to end birthright citizenship makes a solemn mockery of our Constitution. The court's decision took no position on whether Trump's executive order is constitutional, though the ruling does let him put it into effect in 30 days.
Specific documents. Internal communications that had been requested weeks earlier through proper legal channels. The kind of routine discovery requests that happen in every major case. Trump's team had been dodging, giving vague answers, claiming privilege here and there, saying they couldn't locate certain files. The usual playbook that defense lawyers use when they don't want to hand something over. But here's where the script flipped completely upside down. The prosecutor presented evidence, not speculation, not suspicion, hard evidence showing that those documents absolutely existed and that Trump's legal team had been sitting on them the entire time.
But at the White House today, no explanation of how that would work. Attorney General Pam Bondi deflecting when pressed on how exactly citizenship for newborns across America would be determined.
Who would be tasked with actually vetting citizenship? And how, would this be a situation where you have nurses and doctors checking for citizenship of parents, or?
This is all pending litigation. It's going to be decided in October by the Supreme Court, and we'll discuss that after the litigation.
But there is currently no litigation before the Supreme Court in October involving birthright citizenship. Still, opponents of Trump's order are vowing to get the issue back before the justices as soon as possible.
With the impact of today's decision could be far-reaching. Dozens of federal judges have issued nationwide injunctions against some of President Trump's controversial policies, from layoffs of federal workers to federal funding freezes of foreign aid. Some of those injunctions may now need to be rolled back or lifted entirely. Whit?
And Devin, the Supreme Court also issuing several other major rulings today.
Metadata, email chains, digital fingerprints that proved the communications were real and accessible. The kind of proof that leaves no room for argument, No room for creative interpretations of what privilege means. And that's when one of Trump's attorneys did something that left the entire room stunned. He just admitted it. Openly. Clearly. Without even trying to spin it. He looked at the judge and said yes, they had the documents. Yes, they had been withholding them. Yes, they knew about the court order requiring them to turn everything over. The words came out of his mouth like he was confessing to something minor, something routine, like he expected everyone to just nod and move on. He miscalculated badly.
This morning, the president celebrating a victory over federal judges who have blocked key portions of his agenda this year.
This was a big decision.
The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 ruling, significantly limiting the power of individual lower court judges to issue decisions that pause policies nationwide from taking effect, including a nationwide injunction halting his executive order banning birthright citizenship.
I think taking power away from these absolutely crazy radical left judges.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett, writing for the conservative majority, saying lower court judges had gone too far with their nationwide orders. The High Court was not asked to rule on the merits of the president's effort to strip birthright citizenship guaranteed under the Constitution to the babies of undocumented immigrants.
That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation.
The legal fight over that ban now expected to work its way back through the lower courts, though in places where it has not been challenged, the court said it could go into effect in the coming weeks.
The judge's reaction was immediate and brutal. No hesitation, no consulting with clerks, no calling for a recess to think things through. The judge simply looked at this lawyer, declared him in contempt of court, and ordered the bailiffs to take him into custody right then and there. Handcuffs came out. Courtroom doors were secured. A man who had walked in wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase was now being led away in restraints. People gasped. Reporters started typing furiously on their phones, trying to get the story out before anyone else. Cameras captured the chaos, the shock, the sheer disbelief spreading across every face in that room. And Trump himself, witnesses later confirmed, absolutely lost his composure. He stood up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over. His face turned a shade of red that no makeup artist could replicate. And then he started shouting. Here's the part that sounds made up, but isn't. According to multiple people in that courtroom, Trump screamed that he was above the law. Those exact words. In front of a judge, in front of prosecutors, in front of reporters who were already documenting every second of this disaster. The man who spent years insisting that the justice system was treating him unfairly just handed his enemies the perfect soundbite on a silver platter. You cannot write this stuff. Nobody would believe it if it wasn't happening in real time. But let me step back for a second, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking this sounds like another overhyped Trump controversy that will fade away in a few days. You're thinking the media always makes these things seem bigger than they actually are. You're thinking that maybe the lawyer made an honest mistake, or that the judge overreacted, or that there's some context missing that would make all of this seem less dramatic. I need you to understand that none of those things are true here. This is different. What made this moment so explosive wasn't just the arrest itself. It was what the arrest represents. It's the first time in any of Trump's countless legal battles that one of his own attorneys has been physically taken into custody for breaking the rules in open court. Not fined, not warned, not sanctioned with a stern lecture. Arrested, handcuffs, jail cell, the whole package. And the admission that triggered all of this wasn't about some minor technical violation. We're talking about evidence suppression. Deliberately hiding documents that a judge had ordered turned over. Documents that could contain information damaging enough that Trump's legal team decided it was worth risking everything to keep them secret. Think about that calculus for a moment. Lawyers know the rules better than anyone. They spend years studying professional responsibility. They understand exactly where the line is between aggressive defense and criminal conduct. And yet this lawyer looked at whatever was in those documents and decided that crossing that line was worth it, worth his career, worth his freedom, worth potentially ending up exactly where he ended up, in handcuffs being led past a courtroom full of witnesses. What could possibly be in those documents that justifies that kind of risk? That's the question everyone is asking right now. That's the question that's going to haunt Trump's legal team for weeks and months to come. Because now that the admission is public, now that the judge has made clear how seriously they're taking this violation, those documents are absolutely going to come out. The court will order immediate disclosure. Appeals will be filed and almost certainly fail. And then we'll all get to see what was so damaging that a lawyer chose jail over turning it over. The timing of all this makes it even more devastating. Trump is already drowning in legal trouble across multiple jurisdictions. Criminal cases, civil cases, investigations that seem to multiply every time he tries to resolve one. His entire defense strategy has been built on delay, on challenging every ruling, on fighting every subpoena, on making the process so expensive and time-consuming that prosecutors eventually give up or run out of resources. But that strategy only works if his lawyers stay inside the lines. They can push boundaries. They can test the limits of what courts will tolerate. They cannot get caught hiding evidence. They cannot admit to obstruction in open court. And they definitely cannot get arrested in front of a judge who now has every reason to view everything they do with extreme skepticism. Social media caught fire within minutes of this happening. Hashtags started trending that nobody at Trump's headquarters wanted to see. Legal analysts jumped on every live stream they could find to break down what contempt of court actually means and how much trouble this lawyer is really in. Political commentators started connecting this moment to every other scandal, every other legal battle, every other time Trump's team pushed too far and got burned. But beyond the viral chaos and the hot takes, there are real consequences taking shape right now. The lawyer who got arrested isn't just facing a night in holding cell. Contempt of court charges can bring serious jail time, months or even years depending on how the judge rules. His law license is in jeopardy. The Bar Association will almost certainly investigate. Even if he avoids prison, his career as an attorney could be over. And here's the part that should terrify every other lawyer working for Trump right now. They're all watching this happen. They're all thinking about their own exposure, their own decisions, their own potential liability. And they're all realizing that when things go wrong, Trump isn't going to protect them. They're the ones who will face the handcuffs. They're the ones who will sit in jail cells. They're the ones whose lives and careers will be destroyed. That changes the calculation for everyone. Suddenly, following questionable orders doesn't seem worth it. Suddenly, cooperating with prosecutors looks like the smart play. Suddenly, the walls that Trump thought were protecting him start looking like cages closing in on everyone around him. This is how legal defenses crumble. Not with one dramatic courtroom moment, although this certainly qualifies, but with the slow realization that loyalty doesn't matter when you're the one facing prison time. Witnesses start talking. Documents start surfacing. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, and now it's coming out faster than anyone expected. Let me walk you through exactly why this arrest matters so much more than any of Trump's previous legal confrontations. Because if you're just scanning headlines, you might miss the deeper significance here. This isn't about politics. This isn't about media bias. This is about something much more fundamental. It's about whether the justice system can function when powerful people decide they don't have to follow the rules. The lawyer who got arrested wasn't some random associate who wandered into the wrong courtroom. This was someone at the core of Trump's legal defense operation. Someone who had access to strategy discussions, who knew where the bodies were buried, who understood exactly what Trump was trying to hide and why. And that person just went from being a defender to being a potential witness against his own client. Think about the legal implications of that shift. Prosecutors now have someone inside Trump's camp who has first-hand knowledge of the evidence suppression. They can subpoena him. They can question him about who ordered the documents hidden, who knew about the obstruction, who participated in the decision to violate the court order. And here's the really dangerous part for Trump. That lawyer might decide that full cooperation is his only path to saving his career and his freedom. We've seen this pattern before in other major cases. The fixer flips, the accountant cooperates, the lawyer becomes the star witness. It's a classic prosecution strategy. Find the weak link in the defense, pressure them with criminal charges, and offer them a deal in exchange for testimony against the bigger target. And right now, that weak link is sitting in a jail cell, probably wondering how his life fell apart so fast. The judge's decision to order immediate arrest rather than issuing a warning or a fine sends a message that every other attorney in Trump's orbit needs to hear loud and clear. This judge is done playing games. The usual tactics, the delays, the privilege claims, the creative interpretations of discovery rules, none of that is going to work anymore. From now on, every request from Trump's team will be viewed through a lens of suspicion. Every document they claim doesn't exist will be questioned. Every representation they make to the court will be verified before it's accepted. That's a devastating loss for any defense team. The entire legal system runs on trust. Judges have to believe that lawyers are operating in good faith, that they're not hiding evidence, that they're not lying about what documents exist and what privileges apply. Once that trust is broken, and it's definitely broken now, everything becomes harder. Every motion takes longer. Every hearing becomes a battle. Every request for a continuance or a protective order gets denied because the judge simply doesn't believe what Trump's lawyers are saying anymore. And let's talk about Trump's outburst, because that moment deserves its own analysis. Witnesses described him shouting, face red, veins bulging, saying words that no defendant should ever say inside a courtroom. The claim that he's above the law isn't just arrogant, it's legally damaging. If prosecutors ever need to prove that Trump acted with corrupt intent, that he knew he was breaking the rules and didn't care, they can point to that outburst. They can put witnesses on the stand who heard him say those words. They can argue that this wasn't a momentary loss of temper. It was a window into his actual belief system. The belief that rules apply to other people, not to him. Jurors pay attention to things like that. When a defendant screams that he's above the law, jurors don't forget it. They carry that memory into the deliberation room. They ask themselves why someone would say something like that if they believed they were innocent. They wonder what other laws this person thinks don't apply to them. It's the kind of evidence that can turn a close case into a conviction. The documents that Trump's team tried to hide are going to become the centerpiece of everything that happens next. We don't know exactly what's in them yet, but we can make some educated guesses based on the context. These were internal communications, emails, texts, memos, the kind of behind-the-scenes conversations that reveal what people actually think when the cameras aren't rolling. They could show Trump directly ordering his team to take certain actions. They could contradict public statements he's made about his knowledge of key events. They could contain admissions or evidence that would be devastating in court. Why else would a legal team risk everything to hide them? Lawyers don't gamble with their careers over documents that are harmless or mundane. They take risks like this because the alternative, turning over the documents, is even worse. Whatever is in those communications is bad enough that someone decided jail was preferable to disclosure. Let that sink in for a moment. A trained attorney, someone who knows exactly how the system works, looked at those documents and made a calculation. And that calculation led him to violate a court order, commit contempt, and end up in handcuffs. Now that the obstruction is public, those documents are absolutely coming out. The judge will order them produced immediately. Trump's team will appeal, but appeals in contempt cases rarely succeed, especially when there's a clear admission of wrongdoing. The documents will be reviewed, probably by a special master or a neutral third party, and then they'll be turned over to prosecutors. Within weeks, maybe even days, we'll know what was worth hiding. The prosecution team must be feeling pretty good right now. They went into that hearing hoping to get a ruling on some discovery dispute, a routine procedural victory that would move the case forward. Instead, they got an admission of obstruction, an arrest for contempt, and a courtroom meltdown that's going to dominate news cycles for weeks. They now have leverage they didn't have before. They can use this incident to argue for broader discovery, for sanctions against Trump's legal team, for everything they've been asking for and more. Every other judge handling Trump-related cases is watching this unfold with great interest. They're taking notes. They're thinking about whether similar evidence suppression might be happening in their courtrooms. They're considering whether they need to be more aggressive in enforcing discovery orders, more skeptical of privilege claims, more willing to impose sanctions when rules are violated. This single incident could change how every Trump case is handled going forward. The political fallout is already starting to spread. Trump's opponents are seizing on this moment as proof of everything they've been saying for years. That he thinks he's above the law, that his team will break any rule to protect him, that the chaos and corruption are baked into his entire operation. Attack ads are being cut. Fundraising emails are being written. Talking points are being distributed. The political machine never sleeps, and this is too good an opportunity to waste. But even supporters who have stuck with Trump through everything might find this one harder to explain away. You can spin a policy disagreement. You can argue about political prosecutions. You can claim media bias and fake news. But it's much harder to spin a video of your own lawyer admitting to hiding evidence and getting arrested for contempt. That's not interpretation. That's not spin. That's reality playing out in real time, documented, filmed, undeniable. The late-night comedians are already writing their monologues. The cable news panels are already booking their guests. The social media algorithms are already amplifying the most dramatic moments. This story has everything that modern audiences crave: high-stakes courtroom drama, a shocking admission, an immediate arrest, a screaming defendant, and the looming promise of even more revelations when those hidden documents finally see the light of day. But beneath all the noise and spectacle, there's a serious question that everyone should be asking. What does it say about our justice system when a former president's legal team feels entitled to hide evidence from a court? What does it say about accountability when powerful people believe they can ignore orders they don't like? What does it say about the rule of law when those tactics are exposed not by some heroic prosecutor, but by a lawyer who simply couldn't keep his story straight under pressure? The judge who ordered this arrest understood the stakes. That's why the reaction was so swift and so severe. Not because of politics, not because of personal animosity toward Trump, but because allowing this kind of conduct to slide would have been worse. It would have told every future defendant that court orders are optional, that evidence can be hidden if you think you can get away with it, that the rules only apply to people who can't afford expensive lawyers. This judge wasn't willing to let that message be sent. And now a lawyer is in jail, a legal team is in crisis, and a former president is facing questions he can't easily answer. Let me tell you about the ripple effects that are already spreading through the legal community. Attorneys who have no connection to Trump at all are talking about this case. They're updating their continuing education materials. They're warning their junior associates about what happens when you cross the line. This incident is going to be taught in law schools as a cautionary tale, an example of how quickly a career can end when you prioritize loyalty to a client over loyalty to the court. The lawyer who got arrested will likely never practice law again. Even if he avoids prison, even if he somehow keeps his license, who would hire him? Who would trust him with their most sensitive legal matters? His reputation is destroyed. His career is over. And for what? To protect documents that are probably going to come out anyway. To buy Trump a few extra weeks of secrecy before the inevitable disclosure. That's the tragedy of cases like this. The cover-up is almost always worse than the crime. Whatever was in those documents, however damaging it might have been, it's hard to imagine it was worth this. Worth a lawyer's freedom. Worth a legal team's credibility. Worth giving prosecutors exactly the kind of leverage they needed to push harder and dig deeper. Here's what happens next, and I want you to pay close attention, because the coming days and weeks are going to determine whether this moment becomes a footnote in Trump's long legal saga or the turning point that changes everything. The lawyer sitting in that jail cell right now is facing decisions that could reshape the entire landscape of Trump's legal exposure. And every other attorney who's ever worked for Trump is watching those decisions with growing anxiety. Let me break down the practical reality of what contempt of court means for this lawyer. He's not just spending a night in holding and then going home with a slap on the wrist. The judge can impose serious consequences, jail time measured in weeks or months, fines that could reach into the tens of thousands of dollars, referral to the Bar Association for disciplinary proceedings that could result in disbarment. This isn't a minor infraction. This is a direct attack on the court's authority, and judges protect that authority fiercely. The lawyer now has a choice to make. He can continue protecting Trump, refuse to cooperate, serve his time, and hope that somewhere down the line, Trump rewards his loyalty with a pardon or some other form of relief. Or he can start talking. He can tell prosecutors exactly what happened, who ordered the documents hidden, who knew about the obstruction, what else might still be out there that hasn't been turned over. He can negotiate for a lighter sentence, for protection of his license, for a path back to some kind of normal life. History suggests which choice most people make when faced with real prison time. Loyalty is easy when it costs you nothing. It's much harder when it costs you your freedom, your career, your family's financial security. Prosecutors know this. That's why they're probably already preparing an offer, a deal that gives this lawyer a way out in exchange for his cooperation against the bigger target. And that bigger target is Trump himself. If this lawyer decides to talk, he can provide testimony about the internal decision-making process that led to the evidence suppression. He can identify who gave the orders, who participated in the cover-up, what was said in meetings where these strategies were discussed. That testimony could be the foundation for obstruction charges against Trump or against other members of his legal team. It could open doors that prosecutors have been trying to pry open for years. But even if this lawyer stays silent, even if he takes his punishment and refuses to say another word, the damage is already done. The admission is on the record. The contempt finding is final. The judge's perception of Trump's legal team is permanently altered. Every motion they file from now on will be viewed with skepticism. Every claim they make about privilege or unavailability will be questioned. Every request for leniency or extension will be denied. That's the hidden cost of this incident. It's not just about one lawyer getting arrested. It's about the erosion of trust that makes all future legal battles harder to win. When you're defending someone as controversial as Trump, you need every advantage you can get. You need judges who at least believe you're acting in good faith. You need prosecutors who can't automatically assume the worst about your conduct. This incident just stripped away those advantages. Let me talk about the documents themselves, because I know that's what everyone really wants to know about. What's in them? Why were they worth hiding? When will we finally see them? Based on what we know from court filings and witness accounts, these documents are internal communications from within Trump's organization. Emails, text messages, internal memos, the kind of casual back and forth that happens when people aren't thinking about courtrooms or subpoenas or future legal battles. In those informal settings, people often say things they would never say on the record. They admit things they would never admit in public. They reveal knowledge and intentions that official statements carefully conceal. That's almost certainly what Trump's team was trying to hide. Communications that show awareness of wrongdoing. Messages that contradict public claims. Discussions that reveal strategies to avoid accountability. Nothing gets hidden unless it's damaging. Nobody risks contempt and arrest over documents that are innocuous or irrelevant. Whatever is in those files, it's bad enough that someone decided jail was preferable to disclosure. The court will order these documents produced. Trump's team will file emergency appeals, claiming privilege or work product protection or any other legal doctrine they can think of. Those appeals will likely fail, especially given the contempt finding and the admission of obstruction. A special master might review the documents first, redacting anything that's legitimately privileged, but the core content will come out. And when it does, the political and legal fallout could be enormous. Imagine emails showing Trump directly involved in decisions he's publicly denied making. Imagine texts contradicting sworn testimony he's given in other cases. Imagine internal memos laying out strategies that look a lot like obstruction, or witness tampering, or conspiracy. Any of those things could spawn new investigations, new charges, new legal headaches for someone who already has more than his share. The prosecution's strategy from here is fairly obvious. They're going to use this incident to justify demanding even more documents, even broader discovery, even tighter judicial oversight of Trump's legal team. They'll file motions arguing that because Trump's lawyers have already been caught hiding evidence, the court can't trust that they've turned over everything they're supposed to turn over. They'll ask for forensic examinations of computers and phones. They'll request depositions of everyone involved in the document production process. And judges are going to grant those requests, because once you've been caught hiding evidence, you lose the benefit of the doubt. The court's presumption shifts from trust to verification. Everything gets double-checked. Everything gets scrutinized. The defense's job becomes exponentially harder. Think about what this means for the other lawyers on Trump's team. The ones who didn't get arrested, but who were part of the same document production process. They're probably reviewing their own exposure right now, wondering if they could be next. Did they sign off on something questionable? Did they participate in a conversation about hiding evidence? Did they know about the obstruction and fail to report it? This is how legal teams fracture. Pressure builds. Trust erodes. People start looking out for themselves rather than the client. And once that process begins, it's almost impossible to reverse. The unified front that Trump has tried to maintain, the image of a loyal team fighting against a corrupt system, starts to show cracks. Those cracks become openings that prosecutors can exploit. The public perception angle can't be ignored either. Most Americans don't follow the intricacies of discovery disputes, or privilege logs, or contempt proceedings. They don't understand the difference between a motion to compel and a motion for sanctions. But they understand handcuffs. They understand a lawyer getting arrested in open court. They understand a defendant screaming that he's above the law. Those images stick. They bypass the analytical part of the brain and go straight to the gut. And in politics, gut reactions often matter more than detailed policy analysis. People may not remember the specifics of the case, but they'll remember the visual. A lawyer in handcuffs, a former president shouting at a judge, a courtroom in chaos. Those memories will shape how they think about Trump, about his legal troubles, about his fitness for office. Trump's base will remain loyal, of course. They've shown that they'll believe almost anything he tells them, that they'll dismiss any evidence that contradicts their worldview, that they'll see conspiracy and persecution in even the most straightforward legal proceedings. This incident won't change that. Nothing seems to change that. But Trump can't win with just his base. He needs to expand his support, to bring in moderates and independents who might be uncomfortable with his style, but willing to give him a chance on policy. Those voters are the ones who might be swayed by images like this. Those voters are the ones who might start wondering if there's more to the legal cases than just political witch hunts. Those voters are the ones who might decide that the chaos isn't worth it anymore. Let me address one more important question. Could Trump himself face charges based on what happened in that courtroom? Not directly, not for contempt, because the contempt finding is against the lawyer, not against Trump. But indirectly, absolutely. If evidence emerges that Trump directed or approved the document suppression, that's obstruction of justice. If Trump knew about the hidden documents and didn't stop his lawyers from hiding them, that's conspiracy. If Trump's outburst included threats or intimidation directed at the judge or prosecutors, that's additional charges on top of everything else. The investigation into this incident is just beginning. Prosecutors will want to know exactly how the decision to hide documents was made. They'll interview everyone involved. They'll review emails and texts and phone records. They'll look for the chain of command, the orders, the approvals. And if that chain leads to Trump, they won't hesitate to act. The judge in this case has shown that they're not afraid to use their authority. They didn't hesitate to arrest a lawyer for contempt. They're not going to hesitate to refer evidence of obstruction to prosecutors. They're not going to hesitate to issue rulings that expose wrongdoing and hold people accountable. This judge is sending a message that the rule of law still means something, that no one is above the court's authority, that consequences exist for those who think they can ignore orders they don't like. That message is long overdue in Trump's legal saga. For years, his team has pushed boundaries, tested limits, and often gotten away with it. Judges have been reluctant to impose serious sanctions, maybe because of Trump's political status, maybe because they didn't want to appear biased, maybe because they hoped the bad behavior would stop on its own. It didn't stop. It escalated. And now a judge has finally said, enough. The coming weeks will bring appeals, motions, hearings, and almost certainly more drama. Trump's team will fight this ruling with everything they have. They'll claim the judge was biased. They'll argue that the arrest was excessive. They'll try to get the contempt finding overturned or reduced. But contempt rulings are notoriously difficult to challenge on appeal. Judges have broad discretion in managing their courtrooms, and appellate courts rarely second-guess those decisions unless there's clear error. There's no clear error here. There's an admission. A lawyer said under oath that he hid documents. The judge reacted to that admission. That's not error. That's exactly how the system is supposed to work. So where does this leave us? It leaves us in uncharted territory. A former president's lawyer has been arrested for contempt in open court. Evidence suppression has been admitted. Documents that someone desperately wanted to hide are about to become public. The legal landscape has shifted in ways that no one fully understands yet. And at the center of it all stands Trump, facing questions he can't talk his way out of, facing consequences he can't delay or deflect or deny. The story isn't over. It's barely beginning. The documents will come out. The investigations will continue. More witnesses may decide to cooperate. More lawyers may face consequences. And through it all, the fundamental question remains the same. Is anyone above the law? Does power confer immunity? Can the wealthy and connected simply ignore court orders they don't like? That judge gave one answer to those questions. Handcuffs, jail, contempt. A lawyer taken into custody in front of the world. The answer was no. No one is above the law. Not even a former president's legal team. Not even when the defendant screams that the rules don't apply to him. We'll see if that answer holds as the appeals work their way through the system. We'll see if other judges have the same courage. We'll see if the justice system can withstand the pressure that Trump and his allies will undoubtedly bring to bear. But for one moment, in one courtroom, with one arrest, the answer was clear. The law applies to everyone, and those who break it will face consequences.